You, the ugly one. Silas Thorne's voice cut through the sterile silence of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital like a blade. 6'4", 250 pounds of rage wrapped in a soaked trench coat. The AR-15 in his hands wasn't pointed at the ceiling anymore. It was pointed at her. Tie them up, hands behind their backs. If you leave them loose, I kill the girl first. Elena Vance looked up from the trash bags she'd been hauling down the fourth-floor corridor. 34 years old. Mouse-brown hair in a fraying bun. Scrubs 2 sizes too big, hanging off her hunched shoulders like she was trying to disappear inside them. The other nurses called her the robot. The doctors didn't call her anything at all. She was invisible, forgettable, safe. What Silas Thorne did in the next 60 seconds would reveal a truth that had been hidden for 7 years. A truth that would turn a hostage situation into a nightmare. For him. Comment where you're listening from. Subscribe to channel. But here's what nobody knew about Elena Vance. Mini cliffhanger. 11 years earlier, she wasn't Elena Vance, quiet night nurse who shuffled through hospital corridors like a ghost. She was Staff Sergeant Vance, attached to the 75th Ranger Regiment, Cultural Support Team, Pesh Valley, Afghanistan. The Hindu Kush Mountains didn't care about your pronouns or your politics. They cared if you could clear a compound in pitch darkness while taking fire from 300 meters out. They cared if you could treat a sucking chest wound with one hand while returning fire with the other. Elena could do both. Silver Star. 2 Purple Hearts. Level C Combat Medic. Close Quarters Battle Specialist. Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape certified. The kind of resume that doesn't fit on a hospital badge. The kind of past you don't mention during a nursing school interview when they ask, "Why did you choose healthcare?" Because what was she supposed to say? I've held men's intestines inside their bodies while waiting for medevac. I've made tourniquets from bootlaces. I've killed 3 people in hand-to-hand combat. I want to save lives now instead of ending them. They don't have a checkbox for that on the application. So she lied. I want to help people. Smiled that timid smile she'd practiced in the mirror. Got the job. Became invisible. 7 years she'd been invisible. 7 years of night shifts. 7 years of doctors like Marcus Halloway snapping at her for being too slow, too quiet, too unremarkable. 7 years of younger nurses like Sarah Jenkins whispering, "I swear she's a robot. Who does laundry for 48 hours straight?" 7 years of walking through that hospital like she was made of smoke. But here's the thing about smoke. Mini cliffhanger. When you need it, it can choke you. When you control it, it can hide you. And when the fire gets hot enough, smoke becomes something else entirely. Elena Vance was about to become fire. The shift had started normal as 2 a.m. gets on a trauma ward. Dr. Marcus Halloway was running on his 6th coffee and his considerable ego, fresh off a 6-hour vascular repair on a gunshot victim from downtown Seattle. Brilliant surgeon, arrogant as hell, the kind of man who believed his own press releases. "Vance," he'd barked earlier, not even looking at her. "The crash cart in 408 needs restocking, and someone left a tray in the break room. Handle it." Elena had nodded. "Yes, doctor." Shuffled away. Invisible. Sarah Jenkins, 22 and fresh out of nursing school, had whispered loud enough for Elena to hear. "Does she ever, have an opinion? Or emotions?" "As long as she preps the meds correctly," Halloway had muttered. "I don't care if she stares at walls." They didn't notice that Elena never jumped when equipment clattered. Never startled when a patient coded. Never flinched when the emergency sirens wailed. Because in the Pesh Valley, if you jumped at every sound, you were dead. What they also didn't notice, the way Elena's eyes tracked every exit, the way she positioned herself with her back to walls, the way she could assess a room's tactical advantages in 3 seconds flat. 7 years of hiding that part of herself. 7 years of pretending the Ranger creed wasn't still etched into her muscle memory. I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. That creed was about to be tested. Because when Elena heard that sound at 0214 hours, the metallic clack slide of a bolt carrier group being racked on an AR-15, everything changed. She froze. Not in fear, in recognition. That sound doesn't belong in a hospital. She'd heard it 1,000 times, in training, in combat, in the seconds before someone died. Elena Vance, invisible night nurse, stepped backward into the shadows of the utility room. Staff Sergeant Vance, 75th Ranger Regiment, assessed the threat. Target, male, 6'4", 250. Weapon, AR-15 platform, short barrel, holographic sight, 30-round magazine. Secondary weapon, 1911 pistol on right hip. Knife visible in boot. Heavy trench coat. Possible body armor underneath or additional weapons. Hostile count, 1 visible. Friendlies, 2 staff visible at nurse's station, approximately 12 patients in wing. Cover, limited. Hard cover behind nurse's desk only. Exits, stairwell doors, elevator bank, fire escape via patient rooms. Assessment complete, 2.3 seconds. This is when everything changed. Mini cliffhanger. Through the crack in the utility room door, Elena watched Silas Thorne move down the corridor with purpose. Not the erratic movements of someone in psychosis. The deliberate gait of someone who'd planned this, who'd trained for this. He was former military. She could tell by the way he held the rifle, the way he checked corners, the way he moved with the weapon as an extension of his body. She was looking at a mirror, a dark, twisted mirror. When he reached the nurse's station, he didn't hesitate, didn't negotiate, just pointed the rifle at Dr. Holloway's chest and spoke. "Nobody move!" Sarah screamed. The sound bounced off the hospital walls like a ricochet. Thorne fired once, into the ceiling. The crack was deafening in the enclosed space. Dust and ceiling tiles rained down. "Next one goes in a kneecap," Thorne roared. "Where is he? Where is Holloway?" Marcus Holloway, usually the god of his domain, was trembling, hands raised, face the color of old oatmeal. I'm Dr. Holloway." "You remember me?" Thorne's voice broke. "You remember Mary Thorne? 3 years ago. Table 4. You said it was routine bypass surgery. You said she'd be home for Christmas." Holloway stammered. I operate on thousands." "You killed her!" Thorne screamed. "You were drunk. The nurses whispered about it. I spent 3 years finding proof, and tonight we're going to have a trial." That was his first mistake. Mini cliffhanger. Because in the shadows of the utility room, Elena Vance was making calculations. This wasn't a mass shooting. This was targeted revenge. Thorne wanted Holloway specifically, which meant the other hostages were leverage, not targets, which meant she had options. Thorne swung the rifle toward Sarah. "You, get the patients out of their rooms, everyone in the hallway now. Anyone who can't walk, you drag them." Sarah was sobbing, hyperventilating, useless. Elena needed to get into the room, needed to become part of the scene, needed to get close. She took a breath, flipped the switch in her head, the one that turned Staff Sergeant Vance back into mousy Elena, pushed the utility door open, stumbled out, dropping the trash bags with a loud clatter. Thorne spun, rifle snapping toward her. "Freeze!" Elena threw her hands up, let her shoulders hunch, let her mouth hang open in terrified shock, made her voice crack and whimper. Please, don't shoot! I was just taking out the trash!" Thorne studied her, saw the frayed scrubs, the messy hair, the absolute terror in her posture. Saw prey. He didn't see the way her eyes were scanning the magazine well of his rifle. Safety off, round chambered, approximately 28 rounds remaining based on the curve of the magazine. He didn't see her measuring the distance between them. 47 feet. Too far to close without getting shot. He didn't see her cataloging every potential weapon in the corridor. Crash cart with scalpel tray, defibrillator unit, oxygen tanks, IV poles, fire extinguisher. "Get over here," Thorne barked. "Move!" Elena scrambled forward, intentionally tripping over her own feet, lowering his threat assessment of her with every clumsy step. When she reached the nurse's station, she stood next to Sarah and Holloway. Sarah grabbed her hand, squeezing hard enough to hurt. Elena squeezed back. Firm, controlled, not the grip of someone terrified. Sarah looked at her, confused. Elena's face remained blank, but her eyes, for just 1 second, were sharp, alert, combat-ready. Then the mask slipped back on. Timid nurse. Terrified. Helpless. What happened next would change everything. Mini cliffhanger. Thorne pulled a bundle of zip ties from his duffel bag. Threw them at Elena. "You, the ugly one. Tie them up. Hands behind their backs. If you leave them loose, I kill the girl first." The ugly one. 7 years of being invisible. And the first time someone really looked at Elena Vance, that's what they saw. Not the Silver Star for valor under fire, not the 2 Purple Hearts, not the woman who'd carried a wounded ranger 4 clicks through enemy territory because she'd sworn an oath. "I will never leave a fallen comrade." The ugly one. Elena picked up the zip ties. Her hands shook, on purpose. "Yes," she whispered. She moved behind Dr. Holloway first. As she reached for his wrists, she leaned in close. Her voice dropped. No stutter, no fear, pure command. "When the lights go out, drop to the floor. Cover your head. Do not move until I say clear." Holloway turned his head slightly, confusion and terror mixing in his eyes. "What?" "Tighten your muscles," Elena ordered, her voice barely audible. She cinched the zip tie around his wrists, left it just loose enough that he could work free if he flexed hard, but tight enough to look secure. She moved to Sarah. The young nurse was still sobbing, mascara running down her face. "Sarah," Elena whispered, "I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" "I'm going to die," Sarah whimpered. "No, you're not." Elena secured Sarah's wrists the same way, loose enough to escape. "Because I'm here!" "Hey," Thorne shouted. "Less talking." Elena stood up, turned to face him, hands clasped in front of her chest, submissive posture that also kept her hands ready at her center line. "They're secured," she said meekly. "Good." Thorne checked the window, rain hammering against the glass. "Now we wait for the police and the cameras." He turned his back to her for just a second. That was his second mistake. Mini cliffhanger, because in that second, Elena's eyes found what she needed. The master power breaker panel. 20 feet away, behind the nurse's desk. Kill the lights, change the environment, even the odds. But first, she needed a weapon. Her eyes scanned the desk. Pen, stapler, trauma shears. And then she saw it. The portable ultrasound machine. Heavy battery pack. Solid metal corners. Perfect improvised club. "You," Thorne pointed at Elena. "Check the patient rooms. Bring them out here. Anyone tries to run, I start shooting the doctor." Elena nodded frantically. "Oh, okay, I'll go." She turned, shuffled down the corridor toward the patient rooms. The moment she rounded the corner and broke line of sight, the shuffle vanished. She moved like liquid, silent, fast, purposeful. Room 402, Mrs. Gable, 80 years old, hip fracture, post-op. Elena slipped inside. The old woman was awake, confused by the noise. "Shh," Elena whispered. She moved to the bedside table, grabbed what she needed. rubbing alcohol, gauze, cigarette lighter from Mrs. Gable's purse. The woman was a secret smoker. She looked at the oxygen tanks along the wall. If she could create enough chaos, enough smoke, enough confusion. But fire was unpredictable. Fire could kill the patients. She needed something else. She moved to the supply closet at the end of the hall, found the portable defibrillator, checked the charge. Full. Ripped the sleeves off her scrub top, tied them around her knuckles. Makeshift hand protection. Staff Sergeant Vance was suiting up for battle. What Silas Thorne didn't understand, what nobody in that hospital understood, was that Elena Vance had spent 7 years hiding her true nature. 7 years suppressing every instinct that had kept her alive in the deadliest places on Earth. But those instincts don't die. They just wait. And tonight, the wait was over. Mini cliffhanger. Elena walked back into the corridor, but she wasn't hunched anymore. She was walking tall, shoulders back, head up. In her right hand, hidden behind her leg, trauma shears. In her left, a glass vial of succinylcholine, paralytic agent, fast-acting. "Hey!" Thorne shouted from the nurse's station. "What's taking so long?" "I had to help Mrs. Gable," Elena called back. But her voice was different now. It carried. It had weight. Thorne squinted. Something was off. The air had changed. "Stop right there," he ordered, raising the rifle. Elena stopped, 40 feet between them. "You look different," Thorne said slowly. "It's the lighting," Elena said flatly. "Get on your knees." Elena looked him dead in the eye. "No." The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Holloway gasped. Sarah stopped crying, staring at Elena in disbelief. "What did you say to me?" Thorne whispered, stepping forward. "I said no." Elena's voice was steel. "And you should have checked the back exit." It was a lie. There was no unlocked back exit. But Thorne's head jerked instinctively toward the hallway behind him. 0.5 seconds of distraction. Elena moved. This is when everything changed. Mini cliffhanger. The human eye takes approximately 150 milliseconds to process visual stimuli, another 100 milliseconds to send the signal from brain to muscle. In close quarters battle, a quarter second is the difference between life and death. When Thorne turned his head, Elena covered 40 feet in 3.2 seconds. She didn't run upright. That would make her an easy target. She came in low, fast, like a missile. Thorne realized the deception. Spun back, finger tightening on the trigger. Crack! The shot went high, shattered the fluorescent light above Elena's head. Sparks and glass rained down. Elena didn't flinch. She slid on her knees for the last 6 feet, coming in under the barrel of the rifle. Her left hand shot up, smashing the vial of succinylcholine against the handguard of the AR-15, forcing the muzzle toward the ceiling. Her right hand drove down with the trauma shears. Not to stab him. The trench coat was too thick, but to jam into the ejection port of the rifle. Metal screamed against metal. She twisted. The bolt carrier jammed. The rifle was now a 10-pound club. Thorne roared. Pure animal rage. Released the rifle with one hand and backhanded Elena across the face. The blow lifted her off the floor, sent her skidding across the waxed tiles. She tasted copper. Vision blurred. "You bitch!" Thorne screamed. He racked the charging handle, but the shears were wedged deep. The gun was dead. He dropped the rifle, reached for the 1911 on his hip. Elena shook the stars from her head. She was on the floor, 5 feet away. She couldn't beat him to the draw. She looked at Holloway and Sarah, frozen in horror. "Run!" Elena screamed. "Get to the stairwell." The command broke their paralysis. Holloway grabbed Sarah by the arm, dragging her toward the fire exit. Thorne pulled the pistol, leveled it at the fleeing doctor. Bang! The shot went wide, punching into the drywall next to Sarah's head, because Elena had grabbed the nearest object, a wheeled IV stand, and shoved it into Thorne's legs just as he fired. The doctor and nurse burst through the stairwell doors, disappeared into concrete safety. Now it was just Elena and Thorne. Thorne turned the pistol on her. His eyes were feral. Elena rolled. Bang, bang. 2 rounds chewed up the floor tiles where she'd been a heartbeat ago. She scrambled behind the nurse's station desk. Heavy laminate counter. Decent cover. "I see you," Thorne yelled, walking slowly toward the desk. "You think you're a hero? You're just a dead nurse." Elena pressed her back against the inner wall of the desk, checked her body. No holes, bruised ribs from the backhand, swelling jaw, but alive. She heard his boots crunching on broken glass. Crunch, crunch, 6 feet away. She looked at the desk. Computer terminal, pens, staplers, and the UPS battery backup sitting on the floor. Heavy lead-acid battery. 12 pounds of improvised weapon. Crunch. 4 feet. Crunch. 2 feet. Elena ripped the power cord from the wall, grabbed the UPS unit, counted his footsteps. When Thorne rounded the corner of the desk, expecting her to be cowering on the floor, he found her standing. Before he could raise the pistol, she swung the battery back up like a medieval flail. It connected with his wrist. Crack. Bone broke. Thorne screamed. The pistol flew from his hand, skittering across the floor, sliding under a locked medicine cabinet. He was disarmed, but he was 6'4" and 250, and he was enraged. He didn't need a gun to kill her. What happened next would haunt the security footage for years. Mini cliffhanger. Thorne lunged. Tackled Elena. They crashed into the wall behind the desk. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. His hands, the size of dinner plates, found her throat. He squeezed. Elena's vision began to tunnel. Black spots danced in her peripheral vision. Her trachea was compressing. Panic, the lizard brain response, tried to take over. Flail, kick, scream. No. Elena forced her mind to focus. Technical, anatomical. Target, anterior neck. Objective, break the hold. Method, nerve strike or leverage. She stopped clawing at his face, brought her thumbs to the inside of his elbows, dug into the tender nerve clusters. He grunted, but held on. Not enough. She brought her knees to her chest, wedged them between her body and his. With a guttural scream, she extended her legs, driving her heels into his solar plexus. The force broke his grip. Thorne stumbled back, gasping. Elena dropped to the floor, sucking air. Her throat felt like it was on fire. She looked at the pistol under the cabinet. Too far, looked at Thorne. He was recovering, shaking his head, eyes locking onto her with renewed hatred. He pulled a combat knife from his boot. 8 inches, serrated edge. "Okay," Thorne wheezed, grinning through the pain. "Now it's fun." Elena scrambled backward, kicked open the door to the supply room behind the desk, threw herself inside, slammed the door, locked the deadbolt. Thud. Thorne's body hit the door. "Open it!" he screamed, slashing at the wood. "I'm going to carve you up." Elena backed away from the door. She was in a 10 by 10 supply room. No windows. 1 door. To a civilian, this was a trap. To a ranger, this was an armory. Mini cliffhanger. Medical supply rooms are full of chemistry. Ethanol, ammonia, bleach, pressurized canisters of ethyl chloride freezing spray. Elena looked around. Her breathing slowed. The fear evaporated, replaced by cold calculation. "You want to play in the dark?" she whispered. She reached up, smashed the light bulb with a mop handle. The room plunged into pitch blackness. Outside, Thorne was shooting the lock off the door. Blam! Blam! The wood splintered. The door kicked open. Thorne stood silhouetted in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights. He couldn't see into the black void of the supply room. "Come out, little nurse," he taunted, stepping into the darkness. Elena was gone. She'd climbed the shelving unit, pressed against the ceiling, silent as a spider. The hunt was on. But Thorne had made a critical error. He'd entered her kill box. Mini cliffhanger. Thorne moved slowly into the room, leading with his knife. His breathing was loud, raspy, giving away his position every second. Elena hung from the top shelf, legs wrapped around the uprights, directly above him. In her hand, a 500-milliliter glass bottle of ether wrapped in a towel. She waited. Thorne took another step. He was directly below her. Elena released her hold. Dropped. She didn't land on him. She landed behind him, silent as falling snow. Thorne spun around, slashing the air with his knife. Elena ducked the blade, felt the wind of it pass over her ear. She stepped in, jammed the towel-wrapped bottle of ether into his face, smashed the glass against his nose. The bottle shattered. Liquid soaked the towel and his face. The fumes were instant, overpowering. Thorne gagged, flailed, slashed blindly. The knife caught Elena's scrub top, sliced a thin line across her stomach. She ignored the pain, held the towel over his face, rode his back as he thrashed like a bull. "Breathe deep," she whispered in his ear. Thorne's knees buckled. The ether was entering his bloodstream, depressing his central nervous system. His movements became sluggish. The knife dropped from his hand. He fell to his knees, then to his face. Elena rolled off him, gasping for fresh air. The fumes were making her dizzy too. She scrambled to the door, kicked it open to let the hallway light and air in. Looked back at Thorne. He was unconscious, a heap of wet trench coat and muscle. It was over, or so she thought. Mini cliffhanger. The hospital's PA system crackled to life. Code black, fire in the North Ward. Elena froze. Fire. She looked down the hall. Smoke was billowing from room 402, Mrs. Gable's room. Thorne must have set a charge, or knocked over something flammable. The fire alarm began to blare. The sprinklers kicked on, drenching the hallway. Elena looked at Thorne. He was out cold. She could leave him. Run. But the patients, 12 patients still in their rooms. And then she saw it. Thorne's hand moved. He wasn't out. He was faking. Or his tolerance defied medical science. Thorne roared, pushing himself up from the chemical puddle. His face was red, eyes bloodshot, streaming tears. But he was alive. And he was holding a detonator. "If I go," Thorne coughed, blood and ether dripping from his face, "everyone goes." He held up a small black device. "C4, he rasped. "In the oxygen storage." The oxygen storage room. If that went up, it wouldn't just be a fire. It would be a crater. The entire north side of the hospital would be gone. Elena looked at the detonator, looked at the distance between them. 10 feet. Looked at her empty hands. "Drop it," Elena said. "No." Thorne smiled, a gruesome, broken expression. "I want to see the sky fall." He moved his thumb toward the button. What Elena did next saved 73 lives. Mini cliffhanger. Elena didn't think, didn't plan. She reacted. She grabbed the only thing left on her person, the pen in her pocket, a standard-issue cheap plastic ballpoint pen. She threw it. It wasn't a throwing knife. It shouldn't have worked. But Elena Vance had spent hours in the boredom of the Afghan desert, throwing rocks at tin cans, building muscle memory, learning trajectory and force. The pen tumbled through the air, struck Thorne directly in the eye he hadn't rubbed the ether out of. It didn't kill him, but the shock of a foreign object hitting his eyeball made him flinch. His hand jerked. The detonator flew from his grip, slid across the wet floor toward the elevator shaft. "No!" Thorne screamed. He dove for it. Elena dove for him. They collided in the wet, smoky hallway, rolling over broken glass and water. It wasn't tactical anymore. It was a street fight. Thorne punched her in the ribs. Something cracked. Elena headbutted him, her forehead smashing into his broken nose. He screamed, blinded by pain. Elena scrambled on top of him, trapped his arm, wrapped her legs around his neck in a triangle choke. She squeezed. "Go to sleep," she gritted out, her face contorted with effort. "Go to sleep." Thorne thrashed, clawed at her legs, tried to stand up, lifting her off the ground with him. But Elena Vance was an army ranger. She held on. She squeezed until her muscles screamed. Thorne's struggles slowed. His arm went limp. His head lolled back. Elena held it for another 10 seconds, just to be sure. Then she let go. Thorne dropped to the floor, motionless. Elena lay next to him, staring up at the sprinklers raining down on them, bleeding, bruised, exhausted. She closed her eyes. "Clear," she whispered to the empty hall. But the night wasn't over. Mini cliffhanger. The fire in room 402 was growing. The smoke was getting thicker, and she had 12 patients who couldn't walk. Elena Vance stood up, wiped the blood from her mouth, grabbed Thorne's ankles, dragged him into the supply room, locked the door from the outside with a zip tie. Then she turned toward the fire. "Time to go to work," she said. The sprinklers were losing the battle. Room 402 was an accelerant-fueled furnace. Black smoke rolled along the ceiling like an inverted ocean. Elena coughed, the taste of soot mixing with blood in her mouth. She forced herself to stand, ribs screaming. 2 fractures, probably. Stomach burning from the knife graze, head swimming from ether fumes. But the ranger switch was still flipped. Pain is information. Information is actionable. Ignore the pain. Act on the objective. Objective 1, contain the blast threat. Objective 2, evacuate the non-ambulatory. She limped toward the oxygen storage room, adjacent to room 402. The wall separating them was already hot to the touch. Inside that room, 20 tanks of compressed oxygen. If the heat compromised those tanks, or if the fire reached the C4 Thorne had planted, St. Jude's wouldn't just have a fire. It would have a hole in its side the size of a city block. She tried the handle. Locked. Looked through the small reinforced window. Saw the brick of C4 taped to the main manifold. It wasn't wired to a timer. The detonator she'd kicked away was the only trigger. C4 is remarkably stable. You can shoot it, burn it, and it usually won't explode without a shockwave from a blasting cap. Usually. But the oxygen tanks were the real problem. If they ruptured from heat, the pressure release would be catastrophic. Elena grabbed a stack of towels from a linen cart, soaked them in the water pooling on the floor, wedged them tightly into the crack under the oxygen room door, creating a seal, insulating the room, buying time. It was a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but it bought time. Mini cliffhanger. Stohem. She turned to room 402. The door was open, vomiting black smoke, heat radiating out like an oven. Mrs. Gable. Elena took a breath of relatively clean air near the floor, pulled her scrub collar over her nose, crawled in. Visibility. 0. The heat was blistering her skin, orange flames licking the curtains and ceiling. "Mrs. Gable!" Elena shouted into the roar. A weak cough answered from the far side of the bed. Elena crawled on her elbows and knees, keeping below the thermal layer. Found the bed. Empty. Mrs. Gable had tried to get out, fallen. Elena's hand brushed soft fabric. a nightgown. "I've got you," Elena grunted. "My hip," Mrs. Gable moaned. "I know, I'm sorry, this is going to hurt." There was no time for gentleness. Elena grabbed Mrs. Gable by the back of her nightgown, dragged her across the floor. The heat was melting the soles of Elena's shoes. Her skin felt tight, shrinking. They reached the hallway. Elena heaved Mrs. Gable out into the wet, misty corridor just as the ceiling tiles in room 402 collapsed in a shower of sparks. Elena rolled onto her back, gasping, checked Mrs. Gable. Breathing, pulse rapid, burns on her arms, but alive. "Stay down," Elena ordered. She looked down the hall. The smoke layer was banking down, getting lower. In 5 minutes, the entire floor would be a kill box. 11 other rooms, 11 other patients. Elena Vance stood up. Alone. The fire department was minutes away. But minutes were a currency she didn't have. What she did next saved every single life on that floor. Mini cliffhanger. Elena ran to the nurse's station, grabbed the master key ring, unlocked the supply closet where she'd stashed Thorne. Still unconscious, still breathing. She didn't look at him. Grabbed his heavy trench coat, cut the zip ties from his ankles with trauma shears, ran back to the hallway, went to room 405. Mr. Henderson, 250 pounds. Total knee replacement. "Nurse," he croaked, sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror as smoke curled under his door. "Get up," Elena said. "I can't walk. My knee—" "I didn't ask you to walk." Elena threw the trench coat on the floor. "Get on the coat." "What?" "Get on the coat," Elena roared, the voice of a drill sergeant. Mr. Henderson scrambled out of bed, adrenaline overriding pain, flopped onto the trench coat. Elena grabbed the collar. It made a perfect sled. The wax floors, slick with water from the sprinklers, reduced friction. She dug her heels in. Pulled. Mr. Henderson slid into the hallway. "Hold Mrs. Gable's hand," Elena commanded. "Do not let go." She went to the next room. And the next. She was moving like a machine now. Breach, secure, extract, bedsheets, wheelchairs, linked together in the center of the hallway, away from the burning walls. The fire had breached the ceiling now, flaming debris dropping like rain. Heat unbearable. Elena had 10 patients in the train, 2 missing. Room 410. Leo, 9 years old. Ruptured spleen. Room 412. Comatose patient on ventilator. The path to 410 was blocked by a wall of fire. The ceiling had partially collapsed. Elena looked at the fire, looked at the water soaking her scrubs. She ran to the janitor's cart, grabbed a bucket of water, dumped it over her own head, took a deep breath, lowered her head, ran straight through the wall of fire. Comment where you're listening from, subscribe to channel. Mini cliffhanger. Outside St. Jude's Hospital, the world had turned into chaos. SWAT teams from the Seattle Police Department had established a perimeter. Armored bearcats idling on wet pavement. Snipers on adjacent rooftops battling driving rain. Captain Miller stood by his cruiser, looking at hospital blueprints. "Status," he barked into his radio. 2 hostages released, Dr. Holloway and Nurse Sarah Jenkins, exited via north stairwell. "Get them to command post, now." 5 minutes later, trembling Sarah and shell-shocked Holloway stood under the awning, wrapped in blankets. "Tell me what's happening up there," Miller said. "How many shooters?" "1," Holloway said, voice raspy. "Big guy, heavy weapons." "Who's still inside?" "Patients," Sarah sobbed. "And Elena." "Elena?" "Another nurse. But she's not just a nurse." Miller frowned. "What do you mean?" Holloway looked at the police captain, eyes wide with awe. "She took him apart, jammed his rifle with scissors, hit him with a battery backup. The way she moved." "Captain, I've seen soldiers before. Elena isn't a nurse. She's a war machine." Miller turned to his aide. Run the name. Elena Vance. Now. The aide typed furiously, stopped, looked up, face pale. Captain, you're going to want to see this. Miller looked at the screen. Name. Vance, Elena rank, Staff Sergeant, Retired Unit, 75th Ranger Regiment, Cultural Support Team decorations, Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts notes, honorable discharge following IED injury in Kandahar. Specializations, SAR, Level C Combat Medic, Close Quarters Battle. Miller stared at the screen, looked back up at the 4th floor, lights flickering. God help that gunman, Miller muttered. Stand down the entry team. We don't want to get in her way. But the situation had just gotten worse. Mini cliffhanger. Fire Command says the 4th floor is fully involved, a sergeant yelled. They can't get the ladder truck close enough. Wind and overhang. We have to go up, Miller said. It's an oven up there, Captain. No visibility. If we go in, we go. Miller's voice was steel. Alpha team on me. Gas masks, breaching charges. The SWAT team moved up the stairwell. A column of black-clad warriors reached the 4th floor landing. Door was hot. Smoke seeping through the jambs. Miller signaled. Breach. They hit the door with a ram. It flew open. A wall of black smoke. Intense heat. Clear left. Clear right. They moved into the haze. Weapon lights cutting beams through the gloom. Police, call out, Miller shouted. Silence. Just the roar of fire and hiss of sprinklers. They moved up. Captain, look. Through the swirling smoke, a shape emerged. It looked like a human centipede, a chain of people, patients on sheets, patients in wheelchairs, patients dragging each other, huddled low to the ground in the center of the hall, covered in wet blankets. Get them out! Go, go! SWAT officers slung rifles, began grabbing patients, hauling them toward the stairwell. Where is the nurse? Miller asked Mr. Henderson as he dragged the big man to safety. She went back, Henderson coughed, pointing into the orange glow. She went back for the kid. Miller looked down the hall, ceiling sagging, structural integrity failing. Vance! Miller screamed. Vance! No answer. Captain, we have to pull back. Roof's coming down. Miller hesitated. He knew the protocol. Never trade a life for a body. Pull back, Miller ordered. Get these people out. The team retreated. Heavy fire door slamming shut behind them, sealing the 4th floor. But Elena Vance wasn't dead. Mini cliffhanger. She had made it to room 410, found Leo hiding under his bed, screaming. She dragged him out, shielded his body with hers as burning ceiling tiles rained down, got him to the hallway. But the path back to the stairwell was blocked, the collapse that had forced SWAT back. She was cut off, heat baking her eyes, skin blistering. She had Leo in her arms, 60 pounds. Hold on to my neck, Leo, she rasped. Don't let go. She couldn't go back, couldn't go forward. She looked at the window in room 410. Solid pane of reinforced glass. Non-opening. Suicide prevention facility. Unbreakable. Elena grabbed a heavy oxygen tank, swung it at the window, bounced off, swung again. Spiderweb crack appeared, swung a 3rd time, screaming with the effort, every ounce of remaining strength. Smash. The glass shattered. Wind from the storm rushed in, fed the fire, created a backdraft. The door to the room slammed shut from pressure. Elena ran to the window, looked down. 4 stories, 50 feet. Below, police cars, fire trucks, extended ladder of fire truck, fully extended. But the wind was whipping it around, still 10 feet away from the window, 5 feet below, too far to jump, especially with a child. But the fire was eating the door, coming through the wood. Elena climbed onto the sill, rain lashing her face. "Leo!" she yelled over the wind. "Do you trust me?" The boy was sobbing, buried in her neck. "No." "Good," Elena said. "Trust gravity." She didn't jump for the ladder. She jumped for the drainage pipe running down the side of the building, 3 feet to her left. She launched herself into the void. What happened next was captured on 17 cell phone cameras and would be replayed on the news for weeks. Mini cliffhanger. Her right hand caught the rusted iron pipe. The wet metal was slick. Her grip slipped. She fell. She clawed at the pipe, fingernails tearing. Her left arm clutching the boy was useless for climbing. Her hand caught a bracket. It held. Her shoulder wrenched with a sickening pop. Dislocation. She hung there, 40 feet above the ground, dangling by one arm, the boy clinging to her chest. Fire roared out of the window she'd just exited, a tongue of flame licking the air where she'd stood seconds ago. "Hang on!" a voice shouted from below. The ladder truck was maneuvering. The firefighter in the bucket was extending his reach. "Grab my hand!" he screamed. He was still 4 feet away. Elena looked at her arm, spasming, losing grip. "Take him!" Elena yelled. She swung her body, using her last reserve of momentum, swung toward the ladder. "Leo, reach!" The boy reached out. The firefighter lunged. He caught the boy's wrist, pulled him into the bucket. Elena swung back toward the pipe. Her hand slammed against wet metal. She slipped. She fell. The crowd below gasped. Collective scream rose from onlookers. Elena fell 1 story. But she didn't hit the ground. As she passed the 3rd-floor window, her boot caught on an external air conditioning unit bracket. It spun her around, slammed her body against brick wall. She grabbed the grate of the AC unit with her good hand. Hung there, battered, burned, dislocated shoulder, dangling, bleeding from a dozen cuts, suspended 30 feet in the air. The firefighter in the bucket lowered the controls rapidly. The bucket descended. I got you, he yelled, maneuvering the basket under her feet. Elena let go, collapsed into the basket, a heap of wet scrubs and blood. The firefighter keyed his radio. I have the child and I have the woman. She's alive. Repeat, the ranger is alive. As the bucket lowered to the ground, the crowd broke the police line. It wasn't a mob. It was the staff, Dr. Holloway, Sarah. They ran toward the truck. When the basket touched asphalt, Elena tried to stand. She failed. Holloway was there, grabbed her uninjured side. I got you, Elena, Holloway said, tears streaming down his face. I got you. Elena looked at him, face black with soot, hair singed, eyes haunted. The count, she whispered. What? The head count, she rasped. Did we get them all? Holloway looked at Captain Miller. We cleared the stairwell, Miller said. 11 patients plus the boy, and you. Thorns in the supply closet, zip-tied. You got him out too, Miller said softly. Elena didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back in her head, knees buckled. She collapsed into Holloway's arms. Adrenaline finally ceding territory to trauma. The ghost of Ward 4 had finally run out of fuel. This is when the world learned who Elena Vance really was. Mini cliffhanger. The steady beep, beep, beep was the first thing Elena heard. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the one monitoring the machine. She was the one attached to it. She opened her eyes to the sterile white of the ICU. Dr. Marcus Holloway sat in a plastic chair by her bed. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He wasn't wearing his white coat. Welcome back, Sergeant, he whispered. The patients, Elena rasped, throat raw from smoke. All of them. Marcus smiled, tears brimming. Every single one made it out. Even the kid. You threw him into a firefighter's arms from 40 feet up. Elena nodded, relief washing over her battered body. 3 broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, second-degree burns across her back. Thorne was currently in the prison ward at Harborview, handcuffed to a bed, multiple fractures. He was done. "I read your file," Marcus said, voice trembling. "For 3 years I treated you like furniture. I snapped at you, ignored you. I didn't know I was standing next to a giant." "I just did my job," Elena murmured. "No, you did mine." Marcus's voice cracked. He leaned in, expression haunted. "Thorne." Before he went down, he screamed that I was drunk that night, 3 years ago, when his wife died. He looked at her, terrified of the answer. "Was I, Elena? I was in a dark place then. I don't remember." Elena looked at the brilliant surgeon who had saved hundreds of lives. She remembered the smell of scotch on his breath that night. She remembered stepping in to steady his hand. But she also remembered that Mary Thorne had died of a massive embolism, that no doctor, drunk or sober, could have stopped. "You were tired, Marcus," she lied, voice steady, commanding. "You were sober. You did everything right." Marcus slumped back, the crushing weight of 3 years lifting from his shoulders. She had saved his life in the fire, and now, with that one mercy, she had saved his soul. But the truth was about to come out anyway. Mini cliffhanger. 3 weeks later, the press filled the hospital lobby, clamoring for the Angel of St. Jude's. The mayor was there with a key to the city. But the podium remained empty. Up on the 4th floor, amidst the smell of fresh paint and drywall, Elena Vance stood at the nurse's station. Sarah Jenkins, no longer glued to her phone, walked up and handed her a small box. "We know you hate the spotlight, but the staff, we needed to do this." Inside was a new name badge. It didn't just say Elena Vance, RN. It read, "Elena Vance, Ranger, Charge Nurse." "Charge Nurse?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "That means more paperwork." "It means you run the show," Marcus said, stepping off the elevator. "Though I think you always have." Elena clipped the badge to her scrubs, looked at her team, not just co-workers anymore, a squad. She took a deep breath. The war was over, but the mission never ended. "All right," Elena said, voice sharp. "Show's over. Mrs. Gable needs her meds. Let's get to work." She turned and walked down the hall, silent as a ghost, ready for the night watch. So let me ask you something. Who are the quiet warriors in your life? Who is the person in your office, your school, your hospital, who seems invisible but might be holding the whole place together? The janitor who notices when you're having a rough day. The receptionist who remembers your name when everyone else forgets. The night shift worker who keeps everything running while the world sleeps. We live in a society obsessed with loud voices and viral moments. But true strength isn't about how much noise you make. It's about what you're willing to do when the lights go out and the fear sets in. Elena Vance teaches us that heroes don't always wear capes. They don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear frayed scrubs and comfortable shoes. Sometimes the person saving your life is the one you never bothered to say hello to. Drop your story in the comments. Have you ever underestimated someone who turned out to be extraordinary? Have you ever been that invisible person that nobody saw? Share this story. Not the sanitized version. The real version. Because the world needs to know. The people we dismiss, ignore, and overlook might be the very ones who save us when everything falls apart. Subscribe to channel. Stay just. Stay loud. Stay free. And remember, the next time you walk past someone who seems invisible, look closer. You might be standing next to a giant.